I think this conference has been such a pillar for so many of us to build this future together. So happy that we're coming to an end. And in this note, I want to ask everybody that want to share, as you wish, in the order you wish, did you learn something new here, and what did you learn?
I learned just walking in the door, just that there's a very life-affirming current going on, and it was really refreshing to see Sandor Iron Rope and his song. I was like, wow, I was really blown away. What I learned from that is that I think the way music can kind of help set these kind of frames of reference up that for healing. Again, his traditions are very specific, and so I just walking in cold. I was like, whoa! And so I want to learn more about that. So that's kind of, mental bucket list there. But that's, you did ask, what did I learn? I just heard a human being sing one of the most best song I've heard in ages. You got to work with some DJs if you don't mind. Yeah.
Sandra, do you want to share anything about the song, what it meant, or if you want to share anything about the song, what you sang?
It's just a melody of emotions, There's a lot of songs and prayer songs. There's different kinds of songs. We're just all a community of songs, and songs carry us. Songs carried us here. So, and really giving thanks to our predecessors, in everything that we present, because without our grandparents, we're nothing. We wouldn't be here without our grandparents, And so the cycle of life and, the appreciation for life in general is what the song was the basis for, appreciating our grandparents, So, yeah.
Have you ever worked with electronic music or any, I was just curious to hear, is it always acoustic, or do you, because I think electronic music and the idea of the secular, or is it a song that anyone can learn, or is it very specific to the person who comes up with the lyric? Like, what's the tradition coming out of that?
I have a hearing problem, so okay. You're talking about a song, right? Mm-hmm. You're talking about...
Can other, if somebody made a recording of it, for example, does it have to be very specific to the person singing, or can anyone learn? Or does it have to be, sometimes different traditions, you can only certain people can, like if you're in India, or, there's different traditions that are very kind of tight?
Well, it just depends. There are social songs, there are ceremonial songs, there are songs that kind of impede on balancing stuff, so it just depends, And then that song, was appropriate for our audience, because I think the idea behind everything in music, and we all carry a song, and we all sing, even if somebody's not on an album, the latest album, you're singing in your shower when you have, a good cup of coffee, a good cup of tea, We're singing for the new day, we're singing. Our songs are just, they're so, vast and complex and beautiful at the same time.
Does anybody else have anything to share? Something they learned, or a person they met, something significant that happened to them in this conference?
Yeah, I have something. Is it working?
Yep.
I have something to share. So in the audience today was my father, who's in his 80s, and he was part of the Indian Air Force, very conservative Christian background, and it was really amazing to see him listening to all of these different talks. And what I was reflecting on is how just conversation and dialogue can shape our perception. And so what I learned today was the power in that, and how we must be very thoughtful about the conversations we were having. What does it mean to be inclusive, to be critical, to make sure that all the voices and all of the pieces of knowledge are being included in that conversation? What can we do? So that was a big moment for me.
Thank you. Is your father still here?
He's not here anymore.
Okay. Does anybody?
Can I say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, check. Is this working? I just wanted to say thank you, Sandor, and also thank you for sharing about your father, because I want to give a shout out to my grandmother, my last surviving grandparent. She's turned 92 this week, so happy birthday, Nancy. I'm very thankful to her to be here, and I wear one ring on my left hand, that's my grandmother's, and then on my right hand, that's my father's, so I try to carry that with me, and it's nice to hear that affirmed by everyone here, so thank you.
Okay, yeah, for sure, the importance of family, and I think Kevin mentioned how important it is to destigmatize the topic of psychedelics and how alienating that has been for people that have relationship to sacred plants and can't talk about that to their families, and the importance of education to change those stigmas and taboos, and for us to be able to talk to this and to bring family in. So important. You can vote questions, as was said. I'm going to read the one that has more votes. Whoops. It's a little challenging. Maybe I'll have to ask for help. It's the life of the moderator these days is more challenging with these devices. Lorena, sorry about that. It keeps jumping around. All right. To the female and non-binary identified presenters, what's your experience like navigating the field of psychedelic healthcare with your identities?
I can speak to that. I think my experience has been one that has been extremely supportive, and that's my own experience. I think I've found a lot of solidarity with men in the space who have given up their seat so that I can have a seat, so that my voice can, be heard at the table. And I think, what's important for people to understand is when I'm having a seat at the table, it's not just myself, it's my ancestors, it's my principles, it's my ways of being and knowing. I always share when I'm sitting here, there's 1,000 ancestors standing alongside me and beside me. And so I think that, there's always work to be done in the space to be able to create harmony and balance, right? As Bia shared, we are in a patriarchy, right? And we are being oppressed in that way. But I think that if we are going to really create harmony in this collective healing, that it is our responsibility to lift one another. And when we are taking up space, being able to step aside to be able to give that mic to someone whose voice has not been represented, who has not been heard. So I do appreciate the allies that I've come across in the space that restores my faith and I look forward to continuing, deepening those friendships and that solidarity and continue to water the seeds of that. So thank you, Makwawenen.
I would also actually agree that my own personal journey into this space has been very well supported. I've been incredibly lucky to have mentors who are very aware of the patriarchy of the issues that we face as young women researchers. In particular, shout out to Dr. Carl Hart, Dr. Elias Dakwa, two of my mentors who've been incredibly supportive and constantly trying to put me forward to share my voice and encourage me to do that. So yeah, I'm very thankful for the journey that I've had and the support I've had to get here.
I want to actually say a big thank you to Kevin. Last year at Horizons was the first time I ever used my pronouns, they, them, came out as intersex and was very, very supported by this community. And also very supported by my lab. So thank you, Kate, and everyone there for just accepting. So yeah, it's been a very, very positive experience.
Not sure who is going to take this one. The question is, How are immigrant psychedelic therapists and researchers protected from constant fear of deportation?
So this is a really interesting question as someone who's here on a visa. I actively encourage people to share their own personal journeys and share their experiences in this space. And, you know, as a mother and someone who's on a visa, there's certain limitations on what one is able to share. And so sometimes I feel like a hypocrite. But, you know, I try and do my best work studying these substances and studying this culture and hoping that I'm, you know, making an impact in that way. But there are no protections.
Thank you. Okay, this is a question for Paul. I also want to ask all of you, if you want to keep on posting your questions, please go turn your banner, badge, and you can scan the code there. Paul, what are some of your favorite films on psychedelics or consciousness?
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, I think this is still, oh, okay. I think this is still working, so we're good. You know, there's a whole bunch of films. I don't even know where to begin, but I'm a big fan of Stan Brakhage. He did a lot of experimental cinema that was called Stream of Consciousness narrative in the 60s and 70s. Incredible. Also, just, you know, Harry Smith, who's a legendary animator. Harry Smith did these series of projects called Heaven and Earth Magic that are incredible. Again, in the 60s, actually, his studio was down the street from here on the Bowery. And so William S. Burroughs, a whole bunch of legendary figures had a writing studio. John Giorno is a legendary poet. But they would project these crazy handmade films he would do here on the Bowery in the 60s. New York used to look a lot more bombed out back then. Everything's clean now. It's kind of wild. But anyway, yeah. Let's see, what else? Sun Ra, Space is the Place. Obviously, that's like one of my all-time favorites. Then there's a couple other films, you know, just to kind of deal with the notion of kind of what I like to call a conspiracy of progress, where you kind of realize the narrator or the characters are just kind of involved with all these different multiple realities going on. One of my favorite films right now is called Everything Everywhere All at Once. Oh, you know. And that's kind of how I think we all feel these days. It's like this idea of simultaneity, like everything, literally everything everywhere all at once. That's kind of like the most current favorite right now.
Thank you. Is psychedelics for the Black community a solution for racial trauma?
Racial trauma is political, and if it's healed, the whole socioeconomic order has to be rearranged. But think about, you know, walking around your cities or your towns in our daily lives. Here in New York, you know, think about the subway drivers, the train drivers, the bus drivers, the sanitation workers, the people who stock the bodegas, who work the bodegas, the nannies who are pushing strollers filled with other people's kids. Think about the incredible amount of history riding inside of people's bodies. And this is right in front of us. This is in our city. So when we talk about racial trauma, and in this country, Black trauma is an indigenous trauma, is one of the oldest and the deepest cuts. We have to ask, what world can that healing be sustainable in? And I do not believe, I know that individual therapy is maybe good for the individual, but what about the people? So we need a new politics, a new consciousness, a new container. So when that healing takes place, it's not just one person's healing, it's not just a couple of hundred people's healing, or a few thousand people who can afford private therapy. It has to be a mass movement. So one of the things, obviously, is, what are the mechanisms to deliver that? And those are the questions that are in front of us now. And the last thing I'll say about that is I'm looking at the Department of Mental Health in New York, through which a lot of working class people of color get mental health treatment. Can psychedelic therapy be integrated into the Department of Mental Health here in New York City? Right. And can it tap into the traditions within the communities? And the last thing is that, just to keep it real, we know that our city got hit by a big wave of gun violence, and there has been a rise in crime. It's not the 90s, it's not the 80s, but it's a rise. And if a recession hits, the streets get hot, and the squeegee men start coming out. So we have to demand that a container for healing not just be about the individual, but about the people. And it has to be, I think, a movement for reparations and a movement for justice for everyone.
Can I chime in, or I just want to do a little jump in on that for a second?
Can we just move a little?
Okay.
Because I want to have others speak too, the ones that haven't spoken yet. So just a second. Sandor, can you talk, how can people support the Indigenous Peyote Conservation Project? And can you talk a little bit about the Native American position on decriminalization of peyote?
What's your first question?
How can people support the Indigenous Peyote Conservation Initiative?
Just go to the website.
What's the website?
No, it's about learning about who we are as a people, in our initiative. And this initiative really is about energy transfer. Energy transfer is always around us, what we do and how we do things. So IPCI is reteaching the energy transfer in the spiritual offering, because that's important for us. And that's what we're doing. Our attention has been directed somewhere else, and we're really getting back to what we intended to do, which is really planting those seeds of hope for our culture, our generations, to come. Your second question?
Can you explain to folks what is the Native Americans Coalition position on the decriminalization of peyote?
I'd rather not really get too into politics about it, peyote. But you have to, as I said earlier, maybe some of you were sleeping or not even in here, but yeah, I saw you sleeping. But earlier I said, indigenous way of life, the decrim movement, we don't want to get too far into that, but really you have to understand indigenous movement, we were forbidden to use it, and here we are in 2022, very barely starting this initiative to have it back for us, So we get into a little bit of, and this is kind of like stuff that we can talk about all day, about this, well, who has the right to do this or who has the right to, everybody wants to have this cognitive liberty that I have the right to do whatever I want, that kind of thinking is going to get you in trouble. There are always elderly people in our communities. Some of you have a mom and dad. Raise your hand if you have a mom and dad. Have you asked them to do something in your lifespan? Have you asked them their consent to do something? So just raise your hand if you did. Yeah, we did. We asked our parents to do something. Stewards of certain biocultures, it's just appropriate. It's good manners. How do we teach good manners, So it's a continuum.
Thank you. Okay, now it's really final, so I'm just going to pass the mic around and I'm going to ask you all, what is your dream for the future, and or what would you do if you had $100,000?
I think 100,000.
Ask for more.
can we go by order? Start with Sutton.
Sure. I think my hope for the future is, as we're starting to look at decolonization, that we in turn center indigenizing, really ensuring that indigenous ways of being and knowing are at the forefront. And I think, even to the question that Sandor answered, people say, why can't I have? Why can't I have? When we're looking at collective healing, we have to also look at a restorative justice pathway. We have to look at those who have been harmed and most impacted by, being criminalized to be able to practice our ceremony. I remember a conversation that I just had with my grandmother not that long ago. She said, I don't remember there being powwow. I said, because it was illegal, Grandma. And there was kind of a moment where she was like, oh, okay. And really being, able to put indigenous peoples at the forefront and being able to make their own decisions on how they want to lead conservation, or how they want to have a relationship with our plant medicine, or how they want allies to have a relationship with them in this space. And I think if we're going to be able to achieve, again, this collective healing, we have to in turn indigenize. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is people respecting, indigenous peoples, having good manners, like Uncle Sandor always says. It's very important. And I think I would ask for more money. $100,000 does not get you, very far in New York City. But I would most definitely invest that into the Urban Indigenous Collective, where we're really working on providing access to culturally tailored health and wellness services for urban natives living in this tri-state area. We are still here. We've helped to build this community, and it's important. When we talk about the Department of Mental Health and Hygiene, they don't even, desegregate the data for indigenous peoples here, right? We're, marked as other, hard to reach, and asterisk race, and says to me, just not that important. So we've got a lot of work to do here, and looking forward to being an allyship and community with people who want to help do that work. So, Makwain and Yako.
I guess to go to, kind of riff on what you were just mentioning, I feel like my hope for the future is twofold. One, I kind of believe the world as it's set up right now, our species is slow walking towards extinction. And I worry that we'll even make it out of the 21st century, because small groups of people can cause mass devastation. And not just physical devastation, but economic and psychological devastation. One could argue that the way social media and dark money have intersected has led from everything to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, to the corruption of all sorts of initiatives to try and get us off fossil fuel, to all sorts of other initiatives that essentially we have so many of the tools at hand to stop the climate crisis in its tracks. But we lack the will because of all the different games all these billionaires and various people are playing. So my hope is that we view ourselves as stakeholder. The planet will be here, we won't be. I mean, that's like if we really play our cards wrong, which it seems like we are. So my hope is that we can kind of hit the reset button, and with gatherings like this, with other places, that people can realize that there's other routes, other possibilities, other potentialities that we're not even being. If somebody says that there's no color blue and you never see the color blue, you're never going to imagine the color blue. And if that's the way, it's like we're all just put these blinders on and just walking over a cliff at this point. So, let me end on a lighter note. But just like the amazing thing about the human mind is that we can reimagine things. And I feel like, again, just we wake up one morning and just stop paying your credit card bill, don't pay your mortgage, whatever. You might have some issues, and that might cause problems. But if everybody does it, then the whole system changes. And the $100,000 thing, personally, my motto these days is like, if you owe the bank $1 million, it's your problem. If you owe the bank $1 billion, it's their problem. So, yeah, we should all be billionaires. Let's all, no billionaire left behind. There we go.
I'm gonna keep mine really brief. I'm going to bring it back to this space. I think my hope for the future is that we're doing more of this, in a inclusive way, and I hope that we continue to advocate for legalization of drugs, for decarceration, for using money that goes into policing, putting it back into mental health services, and specifically that we continue to learn to treat each other better than we're doing right now. And $100,000 can start the pot for all the money we're going to get from decarceration and from stopping, for legalizing drugs.
I'm going to try to be even more brief, but I'm hopeful that we can move forward with more gratitude and thoughtfulness. I've been thinking a lot about this idea of interbeing and interconnectedness, and while we're facing so many problems as a society and a civilization, can we understand that we are not just trying to deal with nature, but we are in fact nature, and hoping to bring that idea into new ways of research, into new ways of moving these medicines forward. That's my hope.
I really just think that I appreciate the provocation to have a positive vision for the future, and it reminds me of one of my teachers, one of the people who I really enjoy reading, Robin Wall Kimmerer, speaks about being in an ecology classroom and teaching students and asking if anyone can name an example of a positive relationship between people and nature and the land and their environment, and nobody had a suggestion. So she was just explaining how that we're never going to get out of our ecological crises if that's the case. You know, we have to understand that we do have the capacity for a regenerative relationship with the land, and that the most positive, the most meaningful, and most impactful way to support biodiversity, which is what gives us all the ability to live, no matter what you do with your life, is to support indigenous communities and local communities and community ownership of land, of resources. So that's my hope for the future. And I would put any money that I can possibly raise towards that. So I would have said I would buy my mom a house, but I don't think that in this market that would be enough. So, all right, thank you.
I suppose I would say, related to my talk earlier, that more concretely in the psychedelic community, we can start having real dialogue and intellectual exchange with indigenous people from indigenous communities, rather than mischaracterizing them or romanticizing them or exoticizing them, and learn from the way they understand kind of relational cosmologies, these multi-species relationships that constitute our very nature, and using that to really interrogate the kind of dualistic binaries, the hierarchical dualism, that prop up this system, that's literally ending the world. And sometimes I think that's, when people ask me, like, what's the best way to reciprocate with indigenous people, would be to kind of tear down this terrible society and build something new here for like a post-capitalist future.
I think my hope for the future is that we can build a community that honors psychedelic medicines, that would make our psychedelic teachers proud of us. I think that would be a community where people with all identities are represented and welcomed and celebrated, and that we really do focus on community. I think for psychedelics to reach their full transformational potential, it will not be only because of the success of the medical model. It will be if every single person in the world has access to free support and robust community resources. Let's see, with $100,000, I would devote that to Fireside Project's Equity Initiative, which gives BIPOC, trans, and military veteran callers the option to speak to a psychedelic peer support line volunteer sharing their identity.
Indigenous people were organic before it was a term. And holistic was our way of life, before anything. So what I see is our responsibility in our geographical areas continues. In my area, we are building a sacred home that touches on the holistic components, physical, mental, emotional, through ceremony and also through what we do. Seasonal movements, we get ready for the next season. Everybody's getting ready for this season, right? In your home. Some of you probably put up a scarecrow too, right? I don't know where that came from, but yeah, it's happening now. But anyways, seasonal movements are no different. The old paradigm is still here about how we prepare for every season. So what we are doing in our neck of the woods, we live in the Black Hills, is creating, this holistic healing center. Language is important because our own language could be misinterpreted in the English language, and you don't get the full context when you translate it in English. So we were reteaching language, which is important. And we're also going back to hunting. We are buffalo hunters. Buffalo nation. There is so much that this nation has provided for us, so we're going back to that. Where did you get your meat? Where we spiritually harvested that meat to feed you all. That's where we got it. It was a spiritual transfer of energy. Where did your water come from? It came from the spring in the Black Hills. Where does your vegetables come from? It came from over here. I see a community. Money. Indigenous people really traded for things. I see a community trading for different things that they need rather than money, because money is kind of a little hard to understand for us, But $100,000 reinvesting in what holistic wellness is. We should be having these community gardens in every community. We should be teaching how to harvest, how to hunt, properly hunt. How many went hunting or going hunting? Where did your meat come from? Well, I'm a vegetarian. Okay, fine. Bad hunter. But so, reteaching that responsibility is what I see in all of our communities. And we're all doing that. And if we are all doing that, we should all be talking, having brainstorming, not just on stage, but backstage. So we all know each other and what we're doing and how to interact with each other. That's how I see things. Unity in community. Thank you.
People's psychedelic centers in the barrios, in the hood, in the trailer parks. People's psychedelic centers from the Bronx to Staten Island. That's covered by Medicaid and Medicare. That's free for everyone. That the counterculture breaks out of the festival world, which is very privatized and small. That the counterculture takes over the street and has Burning Man-like events in Central Park, in the stadiums, Prospect Park. And men realize that patriarchy is our enemy too. We have an anti-war movement that puts the war budget towards ending poverty, which is oftentimes feminized. And we put down our guns and we pick up the children that are often orphaned by war. And then we realized the promised land was here the whole time. Sorry. Kids.